All right, let's jump right in. When you open the New Testament, the very first thing you hit is, well, a long list of names, right? It can feel a little bit like a dry history textbook. But what if I told you that this isn't just a boring list? What if it's actually a legal document? A bridge, carefully built to connect two massive moments in history, linking ancient promises to a brand new reality. It's way more exciting than it looks, I promise.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? How do you build a bridge that spans 42 generations? That's exactly what Matthew is up to here. He's not just telling a story. He is meticulously, piece by piece, generation by generation, constructing this incredible historical and, honestly, theological bridge. And he's doing it to prove something absolutely monumental.
Okay, so this is a bridge between worlds. To really get what Matthew's doing, you have to think about who he's talking to. He's writing for a Jewish audience, people who have been waiting literally for centuries for ancient prophecies to come true. So this first chapter, it's his opening argument. He's showing them how the entire epic story of Israel, all those famous begats, actually funnels down to one single person at one very specific moment in time.
All right, so let's talk about this royal pedigree. I want you to get this. This is not just some boring family tree. No way. Think of it more like a legal document, a royal pedigree. It's this super carefully crafted argument that lays out Jesus' legal right to the throne of the most legendary king in Israel's history, King David. I mean, this is a straight-up claim to kingship.
So to make this huge sweep of history a little easier to follow, Matthew basically breaks it down into 3 acts, like a play. First, you've got the patriarchal era, that's from Abraham all the way up to the legendary King David. Then comes the royal era, where we follow the kings of Judah, through all the glory and eventually the downfall. And finally, you have the restoration era. These are the quieter years, leading from the exile in Babylon right up to, well, the main event.
Now, as you look at these 3 eras, you start to notice something weird, a pattern. One number just keeps showing up over and over again, 14. You get 3 sets of 14 generations. So you have to ask, is that just a coincidence? Absolutely not. Matthew is way too smart for that. He's actually embedding a kind of secret message right into the structure of his list.
So what's the deal with the number 14? Well, this is where it gets really cool. In ancient Hebrew, letters didn't just have sounds, they also had numerical values. And if you take the Hebrew letters for the name David, guess what they add up to? Yep, 14. So by arranging the genealogy into 3 groups of 14, Matthew is basically shouting from the rooftops in neon letters, David, David, David. He's stamping every single section of this family tree with the seal of royal authority. It's brilliant, really.
And the hidden numbers aren't the only surprise here. There's something else that would have been totally shocking to an ancient reader: the women. See, ancient genealogies, they almost never included women. But Matthew deliberately puts 4 of them in this list: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and the wife of Uriah, Bathsheba. And get this, every single one of their stories involves some kind of scandal or being an outsider. This is a massive clue, right from page 1, that this new kingdom isn't going to be about being perfect. It's going to be about something else entirely, radical grace and including the people everyone else leaves out.
Okay, so Matthew has spent all this time and energy meticulously establishing who Jesus is. The legal heir to David's throne, he's laid out the entire case. And then he makes this incredibly sharp pivot. He shifts from the who to the how. We go from this grand, sweeping history of kings and nations to a very intimate, very personal crisis.
And here we are, facing a righteous man's dilemma. The story suddenly zooms in on one guy, Joseph, and he is caught in an absolutely impossible situation. He's engaged to Mary, and then he finds out she's pregnant, and he knows he's not the father. Now, in that culture, this wasn't just awkward. It was a catastrophe. We're talking deep public shame with potentially devastating consequences.
But the text gives us this one absolutely crucial detail about him. It says he was a righteous man. Now, that doesn't just mean he was a stickler for the rules. In that world, righteous meant he was a man of deep integrity, but also deep compassion. He was someone who tried his best to do right by God and by the people around him. And that single character trait is the key to everything he does next. And because he's this righteous man, he makes a choice that's just full of grace. Look, he had every legal right to publicly disgrace her. That could have gotten her stoned to death. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he decides he's going to end the engagement quietly to protect her from all of that, even if it meant absorbing some of the shame himself. That's real character.
So there he is, Joseph has made his quiet, honorable plan. But right then, history gets interrupted. God steps in. While he's sleeping, probably just weighed down by this whole crisis, a divine message breaks through from another reality into his.
An angel shows up in his dream. And what's the first thing the angel says? It speaks directly to his deepest fear. Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife. The message is crystal clear. Don't be afraid. This situation is not what you think it is. This is not a scandal. This is a miracle. And then the mission is revealed. The angel doesn't just tell him to marry Mary, he gives Joseph a job to do, a really important one. He's told, you are to call him Jesus. Now in Hebrew, that name is Yeshua, and it literally means Yahweh saves. So the name itself is the mission. This child is coming to save his people from their sin. So let's talk about Emmanuel, God with us. Right after this incredible dream, Matthew does something really important. He immediately connects this whole event back to an ancient prophecy from Isaiah, written something like 700 years earlier. He's showing his readers, hey, pay attention. This isn't just some random miracle. This is the moment you've all been waiting for. This is a promise being fulfilled. So what was the prophecy? It said a virgin would have a son, and they would call him Emmanuel. Now that name, Emmanuel, is a theological bombshell. It literally means God with us. Think about that. Matthew isn't just claiming this baby will be a great teacher or a great king. He's making the absolute mind-blowing claim that this child is God himself, present with us in human form. And this is where the two halves of the chapter just click together perfectly. Because when Joseph wakes up, what does he do? He obeys. He takes Mary as his wife, and he officially names the boy Jesus, just like the angel said. And that single act of obedient adoption is what legally grafts this miraculously conceived child into the royal line of David. The very line Matthew spent the whole first part of the chapter so carefully laying out for us. It all comes together.
Okay, so let's just pull back and recap the huge ideas Matthew packed into this one chapter. First up, identity. The whole first part of the chapter, that genealogy, is basically a legal document. It's all about meticulously establishing Jesus as the rightful son of David, the promised heir to the covenant God made with Abraham. That's his identity.
Next, integrity. This whole story shows us that God's plan doesn't just happen magically, it actually hinges on the character of a real person, Joseph. His righteousness, his compassion, and his obedience in the middle of a massive personal crisis were absolutely essential.
Then there's intervention. The God in this story isn't some distant, clockmaker God who just wound things up and let them go. Nope. This is a God who actively steps into the mess of human history, who speaks through dreams to guide people, to correct them, and to give them courage.
And that brings us to the biggest, most profound theme of all, incarnation. That name, Emmanuel, God with us, makes this staggering claim that this isn't just a story about a special baby. It's the story of God becoming flesh, choosing to be with us in the most real and intimate way you could possibly imagine.
So think about this. Matthew goes to all this trouble to prove that Jesus is a king, with a full-on royal pedigree. But then he shows us this king arriving on the scene, not in a palace, not with power and privilege, but surrounded by potential scandal, deep mystery, and the quiet obedience of ordinary people. And so that leaves us with this big, lingering question. What does that tell us about the kind of kingdom this king came to build?